When you make a new friend or friendship, you don't just go and tell them your deepest, darkest secrets from the start, like typically, unless you're like me and you just like to share everything on camera to your online besties. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Miracle Mindset Podcast. My name is Robbi Jan and I am your host. And today's episode is a solo episode. I wasn't planning on doing a solo episode, but then something happened and I wanted to share it with you guys. So every single day, the best part of my day is watching the sunset. It's my favorite thing. I look forward to it, especially in New York. In this apartment, we get a really beautiful view. And at least a couple times a week, me and my boyfriend, we try to go down by the water and we watch the sunset. And it's just really nice time to just catch up, reflect, like get some fresh air, see people around you. And we were talking, we're having a really good discussion. And all of a sudden it got really, really loud. And I was like looking up and I was like, oh, the train is going above us. Kind of this really interesting moment when my boyfriend said to me, he goes, you know, Rob, we're sitting under a bridge that has traffic going both ways on it. And there is a train going across it. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, that's a lot of trust that bridge is not going to fall on us. And I was like, I was kind of thinking about it. And then, a couple hours went by, I was in the shower and I was just sitting there. And I don't know why I always seem to have deep thoughts in the shower. And I was thinking about trust and the different types of trust. And I was like, you know what? That is such a unique type of trust that we're out there in public doing something, trusting that this bridge is not going to fall on us. And it made me think, that is not unlike our real life, like our relationships and our experiences. We always put trust into things. And when that trust is broken, it can be really, really hard to get back. And this whole thing kind of made me start thinking about the different types of trust that there is. We have trust in ourselves that we're going to say the right thing, that we're going to do the right thing, that the decision that we make is hopefully going to be the right one. And then we have trust in other people. This can be our friends, our colleagues, employees, family members, that they're going to do what's right by us, that when they tell us something that it's true, when they say they love us, that we believe it. We believe that to our core. Or, when they say that we need to work on something, we trust their opinion. That's what trust is, right? And then there's this unimplied trust, which is kind of what I was speaking about with a bridge. You're just trusting that, this chair that I'm sitting on is not going to collapse, that this plane that you get on is not going to crash, or when you get into the car with an Uber driver, they are who they say they are. And when that trust is broken, it can be really, really hard to redeem. For me, a really crazy example of this is when I was in that car crash when I was younger, when I broke my neck. Ever since then, I've been anxious getting into a car. And, I'm driving with somebody, even if I'm driving with Alex or a family member who has never been in a car crash or caused the car crash, when I'm with them, I'm still like anxious because of that experience that I've had. I think to a degree, all of us can relate to having that type of trust broken. It may be that implied trust that I was talking about, or maybe that trust with another person, it may have been broken. And the same way when that given or that implied trust is broken, if the trust with another person or with ourselves is broken, it can be really, really hard to regain that. And then we can start to doubt ourselves. So that was a little bit of an intro. Let's go a little bit more deeper into detail about these different types of trust. Trusting in ourselves. This is a really interesting one because sometimes we start to doubt ourselves. And I think sometimes we don't realize that we're doubting ourselves as much as we actually are. That can be even overthinking something like crazy. It's because you're doubting yourself, trusting yourself that you're going to make the right decision. And that may be because of a past judgment call that you maybe didn't see coming. And that may not necessarily be your fault. And that can also be from other people telling you things that may influence the way that you're thinking. It may be you think something or something is right, and then someone else is kind of getting into your head, they're saying something. And that can really make you overthink and not trust in your own judgment. So I had something happen to me. We're at Fashion Week. We're actually at the Buku show. We were sitting front row somehow across from Kourtney Kardashian, which was crazy. And I got up to say goodbye to somebody at the end of the show. And within like 2 seconds, someone from the back row had grabbed my brand new bag and they had walked out with my Chanel bag and my credit cards and my IDs and everything that was in it. And I was so annoyed. And at first I was like, Robbi, you knew better. You shouldn't have taken the bag off your shoulder. But I had this like given trust that this place was a place where maybe these people are in fashion or in marketing or social media, acting, models, whatever it is. And I kind of had this trust and this kind of mutual respect. And the second that happened, that bag was stolen, I just felt like so much regret, and I was angry at myself. And I was also angry at those people too, because it was just such a crazy thing. Stealing is just makes me so angry. Also angry that I lost the bag because I only used it a few times. But the thing is, now I know when I'm going to these events, I'm not going to take my bag off and I'm not going to trust anybody. And then moving on to trust in other people, that one kind of touched on it because it was both trust in myself and trust in another person. But how many times do we lose trust in another person and that makes us doubt other people that aren't even them? So for example, you go to your best friend and you tell them something and they react badly to it or they don't listen to you. That is going to change the way that you speak to them, because now you can't be brutally honest with them. And the other way to lose trust in people is, as you get older, people are going to mess up the same way that we mess up. Unintentionally, sometimes we let people down, and then sometimes it happens intentionally as well, and a partner or a friend can let you down, and then that can really impinge on that trust that you're having in future relationships or even in your current circumstance. I know for me, when I first got into a serious relationship with Alex, I was having trouble trusting him. Not that he had done anything wrong, but it had just been my past relationship had showed me that even though someone's saying a certain thing and acting a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the truth. And because of that dishonesty from that person, it kind of carried through. So then I had to really be intentional with my thoughts. And when I was finding myself being like, oh, well, what if there's somebody else? Or what if this? Or what is he doing on his phone? And having these questions that were a result of the last relationship I was in, I really had to just pull myself up and be like, okay, Rob, this person has done nothing and done, nothing inappropriate and has given you no reason. So I can't carry that mistrust through to my current relationships. And I think that goes for every single situation. Something happens to us and we get jaded, and then we tend to carry that onto ourselves and to future relationships. And it was crazy. Just after everything had happened and I was outside talking with Alex about the train and having all this, just these thoughts about trust, something really interesting happened that made me think about given trust and implied trust. And that was the elevator in our building actually stopped working. And there was a group of people in this elevator, and the elevator got stuck for 4 hours and they were trapped inside. And then the other day I went to get in the elevator and it made a really just a weird sound. I was like, I don't trust it. And I waited for the next elevator. I've never been worried about getting stuck in an elevator before, but now that it's happened in my building, I don't know which elevator it was, I'm all sketched out about it and I'm changing my behavior around that. And I think that's just another very good example of what given trust is, because as soon as something happens, it's broken. And then it's something that you kind of tend to worry about, and it can actually change your future behaviors. So I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks for dealing with trust issues. We all have them, but here's some of the top ways that you can kind of just at least be aware of them and then slowly start to deal with them. The first one is that understand that trust takes time. There's that token quote that says trust takes years to build and seconds to break. And I think that's really true. I think once you don't trust someone, you start to doubt everything they do. It really, really changes the way you think about them and the situation. So just be aware that it just takes a really long time to build. And that's not just your trust, it's also the trust that other people have for us. So let's say you get a new employee. They show up, they're fumbling everything and it's a mess, right? So the thing is, you have to trust that they're going to want to do their best and that they're willing and able to learn. That's building trust, that's building rapport. You have to be patient. Building that trust between two people or whoever it is can take time. The same way that when you make a new friend or friendship, you don't just go and tell them your deepest, darkest secrets from the start, typically, unless you're like me and you just like to share everything on camera to your online besties. The next thing is to be vulnerable. Vulnerability it's a hard word, not just to say, but to kind of be. I think being vulnerable is one of the things that I struggle with most, because it means accepting a weakness. It means accepting, okay, maybe I don't know best. This is what I can do better. You have to be vulnerable to put yourself out there to then build that trust. For example, let's say you want to do a skydiving course. My sister is actually a huge skydiver. She's crazy. I saw on Instagram the other day that she actually did a night skydive, but they're the crazy ones that do the tricks and everything like that. I'm just saying, let's say you want to do a skydiving course and your new hobby is adrenaline. So you're going to take this course, you have to make yourself vulnerable and do it with somebody else, this instructor who's going to help you learn how to do skydiving and how to set up the parachute and all the safety regulations and all of these things. You have to make yourself vulnerable, become a student, and then after that, you become the master, and you're going to trust that that parachute is going to open. You're going to trust in your own ability that if you're jumping from the sky, from that many thousands of feet, whatever it is, that parachute is going to open and that you're going to have the skill to land and to be safe. So something that just came to mind speaking about vulnerability is we still need to be aware. We can trust and we can make ourselves vulnerable, but we still need to be aware and involved in the situation. When I had just graduated university, I had started practicing and seeing patients. One of the dentists that I worked with, he took the day off and we had a call first thing 9 a.m. as soon as we started, and it was someone calling from hospital, and they were like, my wife has had an allergic reaction because she took, I don't remember what the type of antibiotic was, but she had an allergic reaction to that, and on her medical chart they had noted that she was allergic, and the doctor had missed that, right? The dentist had missed that allergy and he had prescribed her something. She hadn't checked it. Just being vulnerable and trusting that the doctor knew best and did what was best for her, and because of that she had an allergic reaction. So it's great that you're going to a dentist, you're trusting their recommendation, but also be aware. Just check your labels, check your surroundings, make sure everything's okay. Even if you are being vulnerable, it's still important that you're actively aware and conscious of everything that's going on. Step number 3, and this is probably my least favorite R word. I do not like it at all, and that is risk. But the thing is, you've got through the hard part. You've made yourself vulnerable. You've signed up for that skydiving course or that extra training at university or a new job. You've taken that risk. Now you have to follow through with it, and that can be the scariest part, but it's actually easier than the first part, even though it feels more scary. I was actually talking to my girlfriend very recently about the anxiety that she gets when she's been in a car, and she has never been in a car crash. She's just always been anxious about it because she's seen it in movies and she's had a friend who was in a big car crash. So now she's anxious about it. For me, I'm anxious in a car because of the past experience that I've had, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to go in a car anymore. That doesn't mean I'm not going to drive, because that would be really make my life a lot harder. I'm taking a risk every single time I do that because I know the potential outcome, but I'm trusting that for the most part, the driver that I'm with is going to be a good driver, that, the people around me are hopefully going to be smart, and I'm just praying that it's going to be okay. And there's so many different types of risks. Some risks are huge, and that might be someone who is making $100,000 investment and they could potentially lose it to get a reward of $1 million or whatever it is. Wow, that's a big ROI. Or it might be something as simple as like asking a crush out and you have the fear of being rejected, or asking for extra days off from your boss and they say no, and then you're in the bad books, or you have extra work to do the next week. So there are lots of different types of risks, but at the end of the day, taking a risk can really, really pay off, even though it can be scary, and it can also lead to more trust within ourselves, within others, and within circumstances. Number 4 is learning from past experiences. For me now, next time I have a really beautiful designer bag, I'm not going to just leave it sitting there because I've learned a very hard, very expensive lesson. Now, next time I will keep the bag strap on my shoulder and trust that no one is going to cut it off or steal it from me or grab it from me. And that can be with anything. How many times have you woken up after a night out and you're like, oh, I'm never going to drink again. Then a month later, you're out there, you're drinking again, and you're waking up with a hangover. That's a past experience, and we can either learn from it or we can take the risk and say, okay, I know I'm going to get this hangover, but this is going to be really fun. Or you can learn from it and say, okay, I'm not going to drink that much, or I'm going to do something different. Then overcome the past. It's so easy to let something that happened a long time ago, even if it was significant and it affected you in a really big way, it's easier to let that hold us back from other experiences and from other opportunities that might come up. Let's say that you had a really bad experience at work. Let's say you're working with a coworker that you don't really like, and because that person is being rude and they've potentially done something wrong by you, you're not going to make any other relationships at work. That's going to hold you back from making friendships and from finding something that can potentially be really, really fulfilling and something that you can actually really enjoy. I think being aware that we're holding ourselves back is actually really, really powerful. There's so many times that I can think back now, especially when I was younger, that I was really in my head and holding myself back. I used to have a massive fear of speaking to people. I was so anxious and so nervous, and I was just not good at public speaking at all. I think slowly as I've gotten older, I've gained confidence and I have more fun with it. But especially when I was younger, it was really, really hard. I remember I was in primary school and we had what's called houses. So you had like athletic houses where you could compete against other people in different teams. And I was in grade 6, and I remember looking at the person in the year above me in grade 7 who was the house captain, and they were just so cool and confident, and speaking to everybody and pumping them up was just so easy. And I was like, I really want to do that. And I remember I didn't apply for it for the longest time. And finally, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And I ended up getting voted in. And I was like, okay, this actually isn't as bad as I thought. And then I remember straight after we did the house elections, they had the school captain elections. And I was like, there's no way. And I got in my head, I didn't apply for it. And so many times there's been circumstances in my life when I'm like, I wish that I would have set up and said something, not necessarily in an argumentative way, but in a way that I was actually just being vulnerable and letting the other person know exactly how I would feel. And I think so often we overcomplicate things where like we get in our head and we're like, oh, what if I say this? What if they do this? And what if? And those what ifs really can stop you. And I think that's a big part of trust. We base our behavior off a reaction of what we think the other person's reaction might be. That's so crazy. And so often I find myself in that space where I'm like, well, what if? And I genuinely think that is one of the most toxic things that we can do. And it kind of goes into that whole realm of overthinking. And I know that we have a whole gang of us who overthink. And it's something that I'm really, really being conscious to work on. But I think part of overthinking is going back to trust. So whether we're trusting ourselves, being decisive, or are we doubting ourselves and doubting our decision on our gut instinct and then becoming indecisive. And last but not least, the final point is self-care. Now, I'm not talking about the cliche, just like do a face mask, like put in some music or a movie. I'm saying like the real nitty-gritty, kind of getting down to it, understanding that, okay, why do I have these trust issues? Like, where is this stemming from? And understanding the actual reason behind the emotion that you're feeling. And sometimes if we're having these trust issues, it's really important that we speak to somebody. I'm not necessarily just saying a friend or a family member or a partner. It may be a professional who can help us and to give us advice and at least help us understand why we're feeling a certain way. I think as well, books can be really, really helpful. There are a bunch of books that I really love, and I'm going to link them in the description if you want to check some of them out. And finally, I know I say it all the time, but I truly believe this is like one of the most life-changing things you can do, and that is reflection. Because if you are taking that time to be conscious and to sit down and to actually think about things and to break them down, I think you can really understand a lot about yourself and others and why they acted that way or why you acted that way. To be honest with you, I think that's why I have all these deep thoughts in the shower, because it's time where I'm actually just sitting there and like my hair mask is on. It's like, let it sit in. But I'm sitting there and I'm like thinking about things, and I'm not distracted by music, or I'm not distracted by the screen or my text coming in or my notifications. I'm actually just sitting there and thinking, and it's really, really important to reflect. All right, guys, I hope these tips help you as much as they've helped me in the past, and they continue to help me as I'm growing and working through all these things and learning to trust other people and myself. Comment below, let me know if you have any crazy stories about trust, and I will chat with you guys in the comments. And as always, guys, I will see you in next week's episode.